Well, I think really from day one, it was I thought I could get big money quickly without having to work for it. And I imagined that the more money I had, the happier I would be. I could afford more this, more that, and more everything else, which of course later it turned out complete rubbish because it didn't matter how much money I had. I always spent more. I was totally obsessed and addicted to it. In other words, I slept and I ate and I drank and every movement of me, gambling was in my head. If I wasn't gambling, I was dreaming of gambling. Or if I wasn't gambling because I had no money because I'd done it all, it's where am I going to get some money from, borrow some money from, or whatever to gamble. You know, I've been dragged off the street and thrown in a car because I owed the wrong people money and driven down to Wanstead Flats and had a gun stuck to my head because I owed dodgy people a lot of money. You know, I lived in fear. I lived in fear 24/7. If it wasn't fear about there was people out there wanting to cut your throat, or fear of if the phone rang, who's that? Or if the doorbell rang, who's that? You know, I sit in my house in the dark because I was afraid people would see me. I used to park my car two streets away and climb over neighbours' garden fences and come in the back door because there was always people waiting outside for me. I lived in total fear. I mean, I personally have known 5 people that have taken their lives, people that were friends or gambling associates of mine. I carried the coffin of one guy at London City Creme that his wife came from work and opened the garage, put the car away and Sid was hanging from the beam. I know someone else who drove his car into Pickett's lock. And when they fished him and the car out, he had scratch cards and lottery tickets and that pinned all over his shirt and his jacket because it had done him in mentally in the end. You know, I know another couple that betting shops and roulette machines end up wandered away from home, hung themselves in a wood off a tree. I went to Ford Open Prison in Sussex. I went to East Church Prison on the Isle of Sheppey in Kent. And the last prison I've come out of in 1989 was the place, Richmond Common, Latchmere House.
Right, Ian, thank you ever so much for coming on the podcast. We're very grateful. We are a sports podcast, so the link with sport and gambling is pretty direct. So yeah, just want to say thank you first of all. And how are you?
Yeah, I'm good, mate. All good.
All good. As I said a couple of seconds ago, the other bloke, Shano, nice fella, apart from being a Tottenham fan.
Well, got nothing to shout about after yesterday, is he?
Oh, let's not start on that. It was a disappointing day yesterday. Awful, absolutely awful.
Yeah, well, no, we're going to actually chat about that later, Ian, in our separate podcast. But he's been a bit quiet for the last couple of weeks. Tottenham, is 3 wins out of 3, then the wheels have fallen off.
And three losses, all by 3 goals, isn't it?
Oh yeah, I was watching it. My boy's 17 and he's a Tottenham fan. And I was watching it with him and I said, I can't remember the last time we've lost a game, like we've lost 3 games in a row by 3 goals. Yeah. Turns out it was about 18 years ago before he was born. What a nightmare, eh?
Nice little stat for you there. Yeah. But Ian, I thought it would only, if it's all right of you, to make sense to go back to the beginning. When you first started gambling. I don't know if you can remember even putting your first bet on or even what you was betting on at the time. But just to get a real understanding of how it started for you, if that's all right.
Yeah, well, I left school before I took my exams because my uncle, who did contract work, offered me a job with him because I used to work with him in school holidays. So I asked my parents when I saw the headmaster, said, "Can I leave?" And I left school at the age of 15. From day one, he worked all over the country, so we was working away from home in lodgings, go home weekend sort of thing. And my uncle used to have a bet, but nothing big, just a little bet, sort of regularly. He used to follow certain trainers and this, that and the other. And he introduced me to the old style betting shop, which is nothing like today. It was, you couldn't see in there because it was frosted glass windows. And at the time, that was 1961, you were only allowed to stay in the betting shop for 10 minutes, put a bet on and then leave. There was no commentary, no nothing. Just put your bet on and then went back later and got the result. Guy phoned up and ticker tape and all that. Anyway, my first bet, I was earning £4, 10 shillings a week. And my first bet was 11 shillings old money, which is 55 pence now. And I picked out 4 horses. My uncle told me I picked out 4 horses and done a 5p win Yankee, or a shilling win Yankee as it was then. And anyway, it wasn't successful, but it was a bit of fun. And so I had won a few more bets. And then all of a sudden one week I picked out 3 winners just by sheer luck. 3 out of the 4 come up. And I got back the equivalent of just over 3 weeks' wages. And I thought, oh, this is great. This, you know, it's better than working. And from that day, really, I got more and more interested in it. And then it was a question. I didn't just have the odd bet, sort of every few days or something, or on a Saturday. I was gambling practically every day. I've got to go and put a bet on. Got to go and put a bet on. And then as over the years as it changed, and all of a sudden you got a commentary. You was allowed to stay in the betting shop, and you got a commentary on the race through this thing called Exchange Telegraph, which was a little box that was up in the corner of the room, and you got a commentary from wherever it was around the world, or around the country, and it was fun. It was fun, you know. But I got more and more into this, you know, and I love nothing better than to listen to the commentary and get, because the commentators always made it sound exciting, neck and neck and all that. When you look at the paper the next day, won by 3 lengths. But, you know, it was fun, and I had the odd win, which made it even more fun. So then it took me 18 months from the age of 15. Before my 17th birthday, I was actually hooked on it. And when I was hooked on it, that meant I gambled everything I had. So if I earned £4 10 shillings a week, I gambled £4 11 shillings a week. I always gambled more than what I had.
So it was like the whole experience. Then it was going there. It was putting your bet on. Was it the fault of easy, like not winning a week's wage in a bet, or was it the whole experience that sort of drew you to it?
Well, I think really from day one, it was, I thought I could get big money quickly without having to work for it. And I imagined that the more money I had, the happier I would be. I could afford more this, more that, and more everything else, which of course later turned out complete rubbish, because it didn't matter how much money I had. I always spent more than I had gambling, which meant that, you know, from having a car, when I left working with my uncle up 5.5 years and went on my own subcontracting. And within 2 or 3 weeks, I was earning 5 or 6 times a week more than my dad, who worked all his life. But I never ever had anything. You know, my old man used to look at me and think, what a waste you are. You know, why don't you just stop this gambling? But so of course, by that time I was... Sorry?
Oh, I was going to say, when you say it was like, obviously, like your uncle is where you sort of picked it up, you saw it from your uncle and everything. And then obviously where you've got into it, and like you said, you're going down the bookies and everything, was that like the norm? Was it back in the day then? Was that like a normal thing for fellas to do? Was like to go work with gambling? It wasn't seen as like a bad thing, was it? To have a little flutter.
Nearly every person had a bet, whether it was just on a Saturday on the old ITV7, or, you know, just a bit of fun to watch on the TV when at the weekend or something. But I got into it that I had to have a bet every day. Right. It was like, you know, I'm on drugs or something, and I've got to have a drug every day. I can't just have a recreational one at the weekend. I had this dream that the more, you know, I was going to have this big win, and the more money I could win, the happier I would be, and everything else. Which, of course, it didn't matter at the end if I won or if I lost. You know, I won large amounts at a time. But the thing was, the best way I had to really sum up what is a compulsive gambler, it's someone who can't stop. Because you can't stop when you're winning, because you want to win more. And if you lose, you don't want you want your money back. So you carry on gambling then.
And when you was at that point, was you still enjoying it, or is it more?
Well, I wouldn't say enjoyment was the right word. I was totally obsessed and addicted to it. In other words, I slept and I ate and I drank, and every movement me gambling was in my head, because it was 24/7. If I wasn't gambling, I was dreaming of gambling. Or if I wasn't gambling because I had no money because I'd done it all, it's where am I going to get some money from, borrow some money from, or whatever, to gamble. And that's what I did. I begged, borrowed, and finally ended up stealing and turned to crime, which then led to other things. And like I said, you know, I went to prison 5 times because of my gambling. You know, I had 2 marriages.
So I was going to say, was it like only the horses that you was betting on, or was as a gambler, would you bet on the dogs? I bet on the dogs. I bet on the football. I bet on
a compulsive gambler. I used to look down my noses at people that played fruit machines in pubs and all that, and I think only women and idiots play fruit machines, you know. But really, a compulsive gambler, if you can't get your fix off a certain thing, like, I'll just have a couple of instances. In 1982, 83, there was no horse racing and dog racing in this country for quite a number of weeks because of the bad frost and everything else. Now, bookmakers and betting shops started putting on, transmitted from Belgium, trotting racing. And that's like, you know, Ben-Hur, like chariot, like
Right.
guys on a chariot, trotting racing.
Yeah.
I ended up, I thought I was an expert on trotting racing, you know, and I was, because one race in particular, I picked this thing out and it won 12-1. And all of a sudden I'm in the shop of strange people in a different town. And I'm going around telling everyone, I'll back this, you know, as if I'm the expert. And then lo and behold, 5 minutes later, they said steward's inquiry. And the horse that I backed, or the chariot I backed, got disqualified because he broke into a gallop.
No.
Because trotting racing, you're supposed to be keeping 1 foot on the ground. And, you know, the first time in my life I've ever lost a race because my horse went too fast. I normally went too slow. That's the madness of it. A compulsive gambler will gamble on anything, literally anything, you know. It flies up a wall. Or I had a guy working for me, and I used to begrudge paying the fellas work. I used to begrudge paying them their wages at the end of the week. So I sat in the van with me on a Friday before I paid him his wages, and literally I was playing in noughts and crosses for money because I just had to gamble. You know,
So-
it's utter madness.
So it was
And
it was sort of like 24/7 for you, just anything you
Yeah.
could gamble on.
And it's not the amounts. Gambling's not about money. You know, I've heard some sad stories in the rooms of people with a few quid. I've heard someone else sat in the room that I was in, gambled £348 million and ended up doing a 14-year prison sentence for it. You know, because he conned top businesses and all that, have a lot of money. He ran a Ponzi scheme, and his name was Nick Levine. If you go on the internet, you'll read about Nick Levine. You know, where he spent £250,000 on his son's bar mitzvah and a private jet and this, that, and the other. When he finally ended up at the Old Bailey, you know, for conning all these people out of all this money, his total assets were £1.
God blimey.
It's the madness of it all.
Yeah, so, you know, it doesn't matter whether you're a millionaire or you're working class, middle class, you know, if you can get access to it, whatever money you're putting on, it can grab you and get you in.
In 2004, I had the biggest win of my life without having a bet. Because a dear aunt of mine, who was my godmother, passed away in Somerset. She had no children, and her husband had died a few years previous. And she left all nieces and nephews 1,000 here and 2,000 there and blah, blah. To me, she left her house, 80 odd thousand, it doesn't matter about the amounts, but 80 odd thousand in cash, stocks and shares, over £250,000. Now, I was gambling at the time. I sold the house and done the lot in 10 months, £250,000, which just proves that there'll never be enough money printed to satisfy a compulsive gambler.
And that was in 2004.
So that was in 2004. So when I say we're in recovery, you know, that means I do not gamble full stop. I don't buy a lottery ticket. I don't buy a raffle. If I go to somewhere and there's a charity do, and they got a charity raffle, and they come round, I say, I don't want a raffle ticket. I don't gamble. Here's a £5, put it in the, you know, I don't need to gamble on anything, because the first little taste of it could drive me back to what I was. And it's not just the gambling, the money I won or lost. It's the person, the monster that it turns me into.
It's funny. It's like where does the help come from at the end of the day? Because obviously, like, you're around people, people see you, people know what you like, and you must sort of like say to people, "Oh, I've blown this, or I've done that," and there must be some people like trying to get into you and say, "Look, Ian, do you think you need to slow down with the gambling?" Or do you mean what kind of help was there?
Well, all in the public at the moment is about Paul Merson and all that, because he was a celebrity, a footballer, and blah blah. You know, I know Paul from back in the 80s when he first came to Gamblers Anonymous. Now, he publicly tells now that he's got this gambling problem. It's the most serious problem he had, above drink, drugs, and everything else. And the only way he can stay free of a bet, free of gambling, not say I'll never gamble again, because we only do it one day at a time. That's all that matters. You know, today's only that. And he does it by attending Gamblers Anonymous meetings. Gamblers Anonymous was formed in 1957 in America, and in '64 it came over here because an American guy in business come over. I went to a meeting addressed by a church's council on compulsive gambling, got talking to the guy that was leading the meeting, a bloke called the Reverend Gordon Moody, and they got together and started the first meeting of Gamblers Anonymous in England, in Victoria, in 1964. Now, in 50 odd years, 57 years later, you know, it's still working for thousands of people. We've got over 200 meetings in England alone, and it's worldwide. And it works. The program has never failed anyone. It's only the people come to it that fail the program. because they look at it and they think, I'm not the same as him. I'm not as bad as him. But the only word they leave out is yet, because it's a progressive illness. It doesn't start off really bad or really big, but it's progressive. And it turns us all into compulsive liars, to cheats, to angry people. You know, I've been dragged off the street and thrown in a car because I owed the wrong people money, and driven down to Wanstead Flats and had a gun stuck to my head because I owed dodgy people a lot of money.
I wanted to go back to that, Ian. You mentioned that, you know, you left school, you betted at quite a young age, and then within 18 months, you was that's all you could think about. You was obsessed. When did you get to the point where whether you couldn't afford it, or you had to, you know, steal or turn to crime to feed your habit?
Well, because once all my sources of getting money to gamble with, whether it was borrowing off of family or friends, or whether it was going through, I had numerous bank accounts with every bank going, and I thought, oh, if they give me a checkbook and a guarantee card, I could write checks out willy-nilly. I don't have to have money in the account. And in the end, every bank barred me. And then I went through loan companies and finance companies, till in the end I had to go through crooks to borrow money. You know, how bad do you want it to get? It's progressive.
Yeah, so clearly, like, really got hold of you. So when it was at its worst for you, what was your days like? Was you still working at that time, or is it all just about?
I still had my own business. I mean, in my early 20s, I had 11 people working for me. I was earning a fortune. Yeah. I never had anything. And right up until, well, I mean, I haven't worked 15 years and I've been retired. But I mean, I was self-employed all my life and I've always earned good money. But it doesn't matter what money you've got if all you do is gamble.
I suppose the more money you earn, the more money you gamble.
And never pay your bills. I remember one Christmas, I had hundreds of pounds riding on a big race that kept Boxing Day, King George VI chase. I looked in my cupboard, food-wise, and old Mother Hubbard had more in her cupboard than me. I had half a bag of rice and one egg. My fridge was full of papers and all that, because someone said, oh, it's cheaper if you stuff it full of papers. Got no food to put in there. I had no heating in my place for 3.5 years because I never paid bills. The phone was cut off.
I suppose, like any addiction, though, whether it's, you know, drugs, alcohol, gambling, you know, that is just all your focus is on.
You know, I lived in fear. I lived in fear 24/7. If it wasn't fear about there was people out there wanting to cut your throat, or fear of if the phone rang, who's that? Or if the doorbell rang, who's that? You know, I sit in my house in the dark because I was afraid people would see me. I used to park my car two streets away and climb over neighbours' garden fences and come in the back door because there was always people waiting outside for me. I lived in total fear. Fear, you know, and that's when you prop a matchstick under your phone so it don't ring. You know, and today I fear nothing, and that includes death. You know, because by rights I should have been dead years ago.
I think that's the thing. Like you mentioned, like when the Gamblers Anonymous was set up in 64 in London, and I read a little bit about it myself. And the thing that surprised me was that's when Gamblers Anonymous was set up. But yeah, it wasn't accepted as like as an addiction until the late 80s. So, and that's what kind of threw me. I thought, well, people who are involved in it and are trying to help each other are aware of it, but then you've got the doctors and the physicians and the people that know that drugs is an addiction and various other addictions, but they wasn't willing to accept that gambling was like a compulsive addiction until late 80s. And I think you're saying that maybe they're still not recognising it.
Still not recognised. It's still not. Total society, they recognise it as just, oh, it's a money thing. You know, they get their eyes open up if they're in a case with a person that's committed, you know, fraud or whatever against companies and blah blah blah. They don't know the full details of things. They don't know the details that 2 people every day, over 700 people every year, take their lives because of their addiction to gambling. They don't know that 11 to 16-year-old kids is over 450,000 of them that are gambling, of which 65,000 have a problem. I go in there to schools and colleges and everywhere giving talks. You know, these are the things they don't hear. They just think, oh, why don't they stop? You know, they say, oh, drink and drugs are a problem. You know, it can kill you. Well, believe you me, there's more people dying through gambling. And with drinking drugs, you can have so much and you fall over. With gambling, I've known people standing in clubs playing on a fruit machine for 27 hours non-stop. Sensible people, but they wouldn't walk away from that machine in case someone else got on there and got the jackpot. And I know one got stood there and peed himself because he was afraid to leave that machine.
The thing you mentioned about
the government takes so many millions of pounds a year in gaming tax. That's why they won't ever do anything about it.
You mentioned something about young children there and sort of young people gambling, and like something sort of like come to my attention. So I've got a 17-year-old boy and I've got a 12-year-old boy, and there's a certain game that they play like on the Xbox, and there's like a football game, and there's a football game out. I won't say what the game is, but there's a game out there, and you can buy like what they call a pack. And maybe if you buy the pack, you might get Messi or Ronaldo, and you can put them in your team. And I'm thinking, well, that's the
same thing.
That's feeding gambling to young people, isn't it? In a way, they don't think of it as gambling.
Yeah, there's other games. There's another one that the kids were telling me about where they can purchase different weapons and all that. Yeah. It's like war game thing, you know. It's all a question of getting money off them. But I'll tell you two instances, right? But there was one kid. He started gambling with his school dinner money. That's how low it was. He ended up going to university, and a few weeks after starting at university, got his big grant and all that in one hit, and still gambled. He hung himself. Now, there was another case of a 13-year-old kid that sat indoors watching TV. You can't put on television without an advert break with some online gambling. And he saw Ray Winston on there, and he thought, oh, that looks a bit of fun. So he went and stole his father's business credit card out of his pocket. And he entered the details online, because online didn't know it was a 13-year-old kid. And in 3 weeks, he'd done 80,000 quid of his dad's money. Now, people don't read about things like that, do they?
No.
That's a shocking, stat about the amount of people that are taking their own lives because of gambling. But I was going to ask you, Ian, with the pandemic, where people weren't allowed out, and with modern technology where people can sit at home, they've not got to walk to a bookies or whatever. They have not got to worry about being seen. They can sit at home in their bedroom, not hiding away, but just at home behind closed doors, if you like. Have you seen a rise, since the pandemic?
It's rising all the time. Gambling online. I mean, if you went back 10, 15 years ago or whatever, or if you went back 25 years ago, you never had these fixed odds betting terminals in betting shops, right? Or as the papers called them at one time, the crack cocaine of compulsive gambling. You went in the betting shop and you backed on the horses and the dogs and the football and this, that and the other. But all of a sudden they put these machines in there, fixed odds betting, roulette machines are known as. The maximum they can have in any shop is 4. So I'll show you, every shop you go in has got 4, because they'll have the maximum. I know certain people that are betting shop managers, and 70% of their turnover is through these machines. That's what I've done my $250,000 on in 10 months. I never went to Las Vegas or anywhere. I went in betting shops doing up to 10 grand on these silly machines.
Yeah, I just tell you a story quickly. I knew a bloke that I worked with him years ago, and before work, on lunch, after work, he'd go to bookies and play the machines, and he'd come in and say I've won thousands, and I didn't believe him. I was like, you're talking nonsense. And then one day he came in with his slip or whatever. It was like £1,500, and I went with him, and they gave him the money, but he was obsessed, in there all the time. So I remember one day I thought, I'll give you a couple of £100, because I thought, this would be all right, bit of easy money. And it was roulette actually, and I think within 5 or 6 spins I'd done 200 quid. But to this day,
30 seconds a spin. And when I first started playing them, you could stake up to £100 every spin. Yeah. So you work out what you do. I stood on one machine in Minehead in Somerset. I got in there at 11 o'clock in the morning, and they had to kick me out at 6:30 because they were shutting the shop. And I never moved from that machine, because I was trying to. I'd won a few thousand here, a few thousand. I'd never hit their limit at the time, which was 10 grand. And I was trying to get it up to 10 grand. And I got it up to 6.5 grand. That was the most I ever won in one day on one of the machines.
Yeah,
I got it back in 2 days.
yeah, but that's the problem, isn't it? You know, you people like to tell you about what they won, but it's the money that people lose. But when you was going through that money, is there a point where you think, you know, enough's enough? I need to walk away now, or is it's just a psychological thing where I need to win it back, and you just can't.
You've always got that dream in your head. The next spin's going to be the next one's going to turn my luck around. The sad, sick thing about all this, and I like to think I'm fairly intelligent, although some of my behaviour wouldn't think so. But at the end of doing that inheritance, right, 6 weeks after I'd done the final bit of that money, I ended up back in where I live in Harlow in Essex, and I stood with another compulsive gambler who was wasn't a friend, he was a gambling associate. I stood with him in a betting shop, and I looked in my pocket, and I had 75p. That's someone who had a quarter of a million. I had 75p. You know what my brain told me? I'll pick out some Graham forecasts and do 15 5p straight forecast doubles on the dogs, 75p, because that'll be the start. Then you'll win a couple hundred, then you can turn it into 500. It's that dream. It's that dream.
It just sounds like such a you know, like it could just consumes your mind and your thoughts, and
totally,
you just can't escape it. So to do, you know, £250,000 within such a short period of time. If
I'd have had 5 million, I'd have done it. Wouldn't have made any difference about the amounts because I couldn't stop.
Well, like you were saying, you had 75p, and your thought was, well, if I divide this up, I can have a number of bets, and hopefully, you know, build and build and build.
I mean, I personally have known 5 people that have taken their lives. People that were friends or gambling associates of mine. I carried the coffin of one guy at London City Creme that his wife came from work and opened the garage, put the car away, and Sid was hanging from the beam. I know someone else who drove his car into Pickett's lock, and when they fished him and the car out, he had scratch cards and lottery tickets and that pinned all over his shirt and his jacket because it had done him in mentally in the end. You know, I know another couple that betting shops and roulette machines end up wandered away from home, hung themselves in a wood off a tree. You know, people don't read about them things enough, do they?
Well, I'm hoping, you know, even if this video, Ian, helps one person, then that's amazing. Obviously, you've been involved in gambling for a long time, and
Yep.
you know, obviously, I know you work closely with Gambling Anonymous. Do you see a link between people that gamble, any sort of like similar traits, or can it just? Is it just no one's immune?
I've been in and out of Gamblers Anonymous 48 years, and in that time, you know, people are stereotyped. The person who gambles is like, you know, between 40 and 50, old raincoat and this, you know, working class. I've seen barristers, I've seen judges, I've seen police inspectors, I've seen every type of person you can think of in the rooms of Gamblers Anonymous seeking help. You know, it's no one who's stereotyped type person.
Yeah, no one's immune.
It can affect any person in the world. And I remember watching a celebrity being interviewed on TV a few years ago, and the interviewer said to him, he said, this meeting no longer has a time limit. Okay. They said to the celebrity, what regrets have you got in life? And this bloke looks him straight in the eye and he went, none. And the interviewer sort of sat back like this and he went, you must have some regrets in life. And he went, no. He said, why not? He said, because they're all locked away in the regret locker. Because we can't change what happened yesterday. I can't change. Of course, I'd like to change a lot of my past. You know, it wasn't good. But that was it. It's past.
Yeah, in a strange way though, Ian, for people that, you know, are going to go on to gamble and have problems, and people that have been gambling and now, you know, seek help. If there weren't people like yourself that have been through it and been through the lows, then
few people have said that to me. They said you're meant to go through what you've gone through to have the story to tell and share with others. You know, and a lot of people have said to me, I should write my life story in a book and this, that, and the other, and you know.
When we first spoke on the phone a couple of weeks ago, I said to Shane, you know, we've got someone that's willing to come on, and his life story sounds, you know, fascinating, but at the same time, we're grateful that, you know, you're able to come on and speak about it so freely, because again, if people are watching.
I've travelled, as I said to you, I've travelled nationwide to pass on this message, to share my story and everything else. And I've been to not just schools and colleges and universities. I spoke to 850 people at a nuclear power station in Somerset. I've been to 2 Royal Marine camps, one in Devon and one in Somerset. I've been to Windsor, to the Welsh Guards and the Household Cavalry, and spoke to them, because it's affecting people all over, worldwide.
Yeah.
You know.
No, absolutely. If you don't mind, going back a bit to your sort of earlier part of your life, you know, when it got bad and when you was hiding from people, was you married then? Did you sort of, what was sort of your?
Well, I've been married twice.
Okay.
And I've been divorced twice. My first wife, we got married in 1970. We had a young boy in 1971. By 1972, I'd already started in crime to feed my addiction. You know, we should have been really well off and had a lovely home and all that. And she could see the way it was going. And she said to me, we have to have a trial separation. She said, I've got to go back and live with my mum, sort yourself out, and then we'll come back. And she went away to her mother, and I went from bad to worse. You know, went completely AWOL, and that's when I really went into crime. And I went to prison for the first time, 1972.
I suppose with in a way, with your wife not being there, I suppose you was, you know, well, there was no one sort of keeping you in check, if you like.
Well, she never kept me in check. No, kept me in check. I was too devious, you know. And I lied too much. But you know, eventually, I wrote to her when I was in prison, full of lies as per normal, and said I've learnt my lesson. You know, I'll never gamble again, and all this other nonsense. I was gambling in prison. I hadn't stopped at all. You know,
well, that was going to be my next.
When I came out in a short space of time, she found out it was all bollocks what I was talking, and she divorced me and went away and moved up to Norfolk with my young son, who ended up, you know, didn't see much then. She remarried and blah, blah, blah. 6 years later, or less than that, I got married the second time in 1977. My second wife was a lot younger than me, a bit naive. And
did you say 6 weeks later?
Well, no, 6 years.
Oh, sorry, 6 years, sorry.
Yeah.
I was going to say, you weren't hanging about.
When we got married in Birmingham, with nothing, I had no money as per usual, I was a gambler. But we had a couple of large gifts as wedding presents. And we had no honeymoon book because I had no money. Anyway, we said, oh, we'll go. Her dad said he'd lend me his car, this Dolomite Sprint. And we said, we're going on a touring honeymoon to the West Country. So we cashed one of their wedding present checks of £500. And on the Sunday, we drove off down and we stayed at Weston-super-Mare, which is a godforsaken hole. I don't know what it's like now. And I said to her, where would you like to go tomorrow? She said, I'd love to go to Bath and see all the old Roman. I said, yeah. I was Charlie Big Bollocks. I got a pocket full of money. I said, we go. And we drove into Bath on the Monday morning. And before we got into the centre of Bath, there was a big, large sign alongside the road, about 40 foot long. And it said, welcome to Bath Races, the 19th, the 20th, the 21st September. And I turned to my new bride. I said, you've never been to races, have you? You'll love it. And the car went autopilot. You know, I parked the car up. I parked my new bride, who I happen to say was pregnant at the time. I parked her in the bar with a drink. I never saw her for 2.5 hours. I went away, my merry way again. And 2.5 hours later, I walked back to her and she looked ill. She might be suffering with morning sickness and everything else. I didn't care. I didn't care about nothing, only me and gambling. And I said, well, I've done the money. I had £11 left out of 500. And all I thought was, we can't go back to your mother and father's. They want to know why we cut short the honeymoon. We'll have to wait till they're at work tomorrow and go and get the other check we had. So I bought a fish and chips, drove halfway back to Birmingham near Bristol, parked to the lay-by, her in the back, me in the front. I complained all night because I couldn't get comfortable in this car, because that's what I was like. Didn't worry about anyone else. Went back to Birmingham next day, got the other check, cashed it, turned where the car, back to the West Country. And 2 days later, in my head, I'm standing in Joe Coral's doing what I'd done normally.
So not quite the honeymoon.
That's how life went on. That's how life went on, you know. My boy was born the following February. I didn't change. And then after going back to prison a couple of 3 more times, in January 1980, on the 10th of January, I can't forget it because it's my mother's birthday, I went back to court again. My wife was pregnant with her second child. My brief said, oh, you'll get suspended. I said, I've had all them. You won't go to prison. He went, well, the magistrate said you'll go to prison for 12 months. And they shipped me off to Wandsworth. We appealed. Appeal come out after 6 weeks. And fortunate enough, I got it reduced to 6 months. So they then moved me to Pentonville prison. And I got out of prison on the 9th of May, 1980. So I can't forget that date because the day I got out, my daughter was born. And I was the first one to hold her. And I looked down at that baby girl and I said, my baby daughter's life, I'll never gamble again. And at 12 o'clock the next day, I'm standing in the betting shop because that's what I did.
What was it then? So obviously there's so much that's gone on in your life, and I mean, you with gambling, you probably see it in other people. You probably see traits in other people. You speak to people. You know if someone's got an addiction. You know if someone's lying to you because you've been there. You've got the T-shirt. What was it that made you realise? At what point was it you said to yourself, "Look, Ian, we can't do this anymore. This has to stop." What was it that clicked and you went, "I can't do this. This has to change"? What was it?
I'll tell you what happened. I had a good friend that was in the fellowship going back to 2009. He used to phone me every week and say, "When you're coming back to GA?" And I say, "Yeah, soon, tell soon." Never ever did because I still want to gamble. And he phoned me on Tuesday, the 21st of July, 2009. And he said, "Are you serious about coming back to GA?" And at that instant, I thought, yeah, I've had enough of this. I went, "Yeah, I am, tell." He said, "Well, I'll come pick you up and take you to a meeting tonight." He took me to a meeting that Tuesday night. We didn't know. We went to a meeting at Loughton, where I've been to before over the years. We didn't know it was an open meeting, which is where people get presented with awards and you can bring family and friends and all that there. And it was an open meeting. There was about 70 odd people in the room. And I've met many people I'd seen before, and no one said, "We told you so." They just said, "Welcome back," shook my hand or give me a hug. And after for the night, the chairman ran the meeting, asked me to come up and share. And for the first time, for a long, long time, I got up and spoke, and every word I said was the truth. There's no lies, no bullshit. The first time in my life ever, I didn't just admit I was a compulsive gambler, because anyone could admit, even liars. I totally accepted that I will always be a compulsive gambler. It's just that I'm a non-gambling compulsive gambler. And I vowed from that day that I would accept and I would always speak the truth. And I started going to more than one meeting a week and sharing. And I work it in my everyday, not just going to meetings. I work this program of recovery in my life every day. And then I also came to realise the greatest willpower in the world, and no one was more stubborn than me, thought I couldn't control or do this. So I'm reading through the steps of recovery, the same in AA and OA and GA and CA and everything. Step 2 says, we came to believe that a power greater than ourselves could restore us to a normal way of thinking and living. Now it says about a God of our own understanding. You don't have to be you don't have to be a Christian or a religious freak or anything else. Anything can be a God of your own understanding, whether you class it as your children or the meeting and the guys there or whatever. But I got that faith into me, and I've got that higher power who I share and talk with daily to lighten my burden. And I've got no need to lie. And I look in the mirror, because I could recite to you a certain verse that I heard 9 years ago in Belfast of a compulsive gambler. It's so true. It's about the man in the glass. And I look at that man in the glass every morning when I get up and have a wash and shave and whatever. And I look in there and I go, just for today I won't gamble. Don't matter about tomorrow. We'll deal with tomorrow when tomorrow comes. There's an old saying, yesterday was history, tomorrow's a mystery. Today's reality, a gift from God, and that's why they call it the present. There's a lot of sensible things that someone told me when I went to my first meeting in 1973, and I wasn't ready, but someone said, "Boy, if you don't stop gambling, you'll end up in one of 3 places." He said, "You'll end up in the gutter, prison, or the morgue." And I laughed it off and thought it's only about money. That's all I thought gambling was about. And over the years, every one of those words came true. So I don't take anything, I don't take anything for granted. You'll never hear me say I'll never gamble again, because it's not important. Why would I say that? I'm just risking things. As long as I don't gamble today, and when I wake tomorrow, I'll do the same thing tomorrow, things will be fine. Just follow a simple program for complicated people. That's what this is. GA gives you the tools.
And how difficult is it to?
It's not difficult once you totally accept what you are and you're willing to work hard at it. If I put half the effort into my recovery as I put into my gambling, I'll have a successful future. Because I threw everything into my gambling. Life itself went into my gambling.
So is it almost a relief that day you got called up to you know, when you were finally honest with yourself as well, I suppose, and in front of other people? How was that a relief for you, or?
Well, it was nice to be honest. I know you're being honest. But I didn't, when I looked in the mirror, I didn't have to lower my head because I was ashamed to look in my own eyes because I hated the person I'd become. I was a horrible, angry person that just wanted to argue. And I had a fight nearly every day because I had to have a fight because I was full of so much anger through the gambling. And it didn't matter whether I got a beating or whether I won it. But I just had to take that anger out on something. I didn't have the ability to love another person. Totally love another, what we should do with our wives and their children and everything else. How could I when I was totally in love and addicted to my gambling? That'd be like having two lovers, wouldn't it?
Yeah. Well, I suppose, you know, that's what addiction is, isn't it? You know, you, again, whether it's alcohol, drugs, gambling, you know, you put it first. And I suppose that the people that, you know, you're supposed to love the most, you hurt the most.
Yeah, they're the people that suffer. People say, well, you suffered, you went to prison and you had beatings and you had a gun stuck to your head and blood. But I deserved all that because I was a guilty person. The people that love you, and you know, my mother bailed me out 100,000 times, put herself in debt financially to bail me out. And all it did was encourage me to carry on. I drove that mother to tears. I drove my two wives to tears and near insanity. And they'd done nothing wrong. All they'd done wrong was love me.
Did you, we spoke earlier about people that, you know, were obviously get low through gambling. Did you have moments like that where, you know, it almost got too much for you? Or
well, I always said, because it's answer 20 questions when you first go to GA. And they said, if you answer yes to at least 6 or 7 of these questions, you've got a gambling problem. Well, I answered yes to 19 out of 20. The only one I ever answered yes to was question number 20, which said, have you ever considered self-destruction as a result of your gambling? And I thought, nah, ain't that bad. I never thought about topping myself, right? Well, it got to the stage in the early 90s where I was under a GP and everything else for 3.5 years on tablets and medication for severe depression. And I beat a block because my heart was going faster than my horses. And I was going around the bend. Yeah. And that was an outpatient, you know. And I sat opposite my psychiatrist and he had my file in front of him looking over his half-moon glasses. And I saw across the bottom of my file in red ink, he'd written suicidal. So it gets to everyone in the end.
Yeah, you know? It's a horrible thing. And I think nowadays as well, you know, with modern technology, it's so accessible. You know, I know lads that not necessarily have got a gambling addiction, but you know, they will be betting throughout the whole day. They'll be betting on, you know, a Russian basketball match. You know, they know nothing about.
Done it all before.
Yeah.
South American volleyball or something. I know nothing. It's just got to have a bet.
That's it. That's it. It's not even your stereotypical, you know, a football bet. It's, you know, like on sports that they know nothing about, playing the other side of the world, you know, in the middle of the day.
Just the same as when I said about me gambling on the trotting racing in Belgium. What do I know about trotting racing in Belgium?
But just,
I had a bet.
Yeah, you said to me earlier on the phone as well that you've known people that they will wait till their other half's asleep, and they will sneak around putting bets on for hours and hours.
I would lean over the side of the bed and have his phone down by the side of the bed and be gambling online for a few hours. Or even go up to the toilet and take your phone with you there. Or know someone else that you spend about 2 hours in the bath and keep topping it up because he thought he was out the way and he can gamble it. I'm not saying that. I remember when I was married the second time, right, going upstairs with a little radio, laying on the floor and putting this radio on as quiet as I could so that she couldn't hear anything downstairs, to put on LBC to get the greyhound racing results in the evening after every hour or whatever, to see how many doubles we're getting on. Yeah, completely crazy, cranky.
It's just that non-stop, isn't it? Just a relentless need to bet and know what's going on. How many prisons did you end up in, Ian?
Well, I've done all of them in London, from Wormwood Scrubs to Wandsworth to Pentonville to Brixton, A lot. I went to Ford Open Prison in Sussex. I went to East Church Prison on the Isle of Sheppey in Kent. And the last prison I've come out of in 1989 was the place, Richmond Common, Latchmere House. So I've done the rounds.
And what?
None of them any good.
Yeah.
They're either full of rats and cockroaches.
Yeah.
Or if you're in Wandsworth, the alarms are going off every 5 minutes because his fight's breaking out and everything else. It's completely mad. I saw someone nearly got decapitated in Wormwood Scrubs. They were cut with a homemade blade made out of a plastic spoon, cut from their ear right round under ear, because this guy owed someone for a bet they'd had. And you know what he did? It wasn't £1,000 or anything else, because it doesn't matter about amounts. But gambling is gambling, you know, debt's a debt. And this guy owed this bloke a Mars bar. A Mars bar. And it nearly cost him his life.
Yeah, it's crazy. And what sort of things were you doing to you know?
Well, most of it was just common fraud, forgery, theft. You know, I changed my career once for a couple of years. I went to the railways because I saw a bit in the Daily Express and they were short of people and blah. And I applied and I went through training with about 200 other people. And I got picked from 11 people out of them 200. I finished up as top trainee at the training college at Ilford. And on the railway, I got 5 promotions in 15 months and 2 commendations, because at the time, I was in what I thought was recovery in GA, but all it was abstinence because I wasn't following the programme, but I wasn't gambling. And it ended up eventually that I walked out of a station where I was a booking office clerk at Waltham Cross on a Sunday when I was bagging money up for security clear on a Monday, and thought, excuse my language, but fuck all this. And I stuffed all the money in my bag with my flasks and sandwiches, locked all the station up, pulled the rollers down, and went home. And then sat round with ex-wives all that night, thinking, what should I do? And one thing saying, go back, put the money back. And no one's going, nah. And I run away to Blackpool for a week with nothing. I didn't have a toothbrush or a pair of socks. I just had 14 grand of British Rail's money in a bag. And the second day up there, the worst thing happened. I won £10,108. But I come back 7 days later and I've done it all.
I'll take it that.
The first thing I did when I come back, I got the train back to Euston, and then I got a cab because I left myself a little bit of money to get a cab, take me back to Romford. And I don't live at Romford, but I knew it was a Monday. And a Monday night, my meeting I used to go to was at Gidea Park. And I walked up from Romford to Gidea Park and went to the meeting that night and put my hands up and owned up what I'd done. And 2 of the guys, or 3 of the guys, gave me a lift back and gave myself up to the police. And that was the last time I went to prison.
And was prison helpful for you? Was it almost like a relief that you?
The only help it was to me is that I had no pressure on me, because there was no one knocking on my cell door saying, where's my money? You know, it was my poor wife or whatever at home that had to face up to things.
So,
you know, they're the people. We're all it up, really. We're escaping. We're safe there, aren't we?
So in a strange way for you personally, prison was a safer place for you, even though you were in there with criminals.
It was, but a compulsive gambler in prison gets no help. I gambled in prison, so when they opened the gates and let me out, I went back and did the same thing I'd done before. See, if you go to prison, you've got a problem with drink or drugs, they put you in a hospital ward and they wean you off. If you go to prison because you committed a crime, because you're a compulsive gambler, most of the prisons haven't even got Gamblers Anonymous meetings. You know, I've been to start a couple up in the last few years, but because they don't accept it. They just think, oh, it's only about money. That's all they think it is.
Is it as well, do they look at it as because, well, I'm saying because, like, I know, but is it because it's almost like a mental addiction rather than a physical, like, you know, if you're addicted to cocaine or alcohol, your body's almost dependent on that. So is that why it's looked at, you know?
Well, I don't think so. You say it's a physical one. You know, I know a guy who came to GA after he got released from prison. He lived with his mother, his widowed mother. And he was so desperate, he's a compulsive gambler, and the only way he could see how he could get money in this, if his mother was dead, the house and everything would be left to him and he'd have a bit of money. So he attacked his mother with a hammer And while he was bashing his mother over the head with a hammer in the kitchen, she got her hands up to her head, crying out. And she says, why, whatever it is, I love you. And he stopped, went to prison for it.
Yeah.
But he done that because the state of his mind, because he was a compulsive gambler, and the only way he could see out if his mother was dead and out the way, he'd own the house and he'd have money and
So
we do despicable things for the sake of a bet. I stole from my family. I used to, when I was given a home back at my parents after divorce, I thanked them, but when they went to bed at night, I'd discover where my father put his checkbook. And I only want to do it once, but it comes so easy that I did it every night. I'd cut a check out the back of his checkbook and cut the stub out with a razor blade, forged his signature, and went and cashed it every day for a bet. And then I had to meet the postman up the road every morning to intercept the mail so he didn't get a bank statement.
Yeah.
And I'd done that for so long, but I wasn't that clever because in the end, in those days, we used to get a second post. And I come home after another unsuccessful day's gambling. My mother stood in the kitchen doing the veg, and normally she'd look up and say, hello, had a good day. And she didn't look up. And I looked across at her because I was angry as normal. And she had tears running down her cheek. And she says, we know what you've done. We discovered what you've done because you got a statement in the second post. She said, you're no good. You'll never be any good. She said, pack your bags and get out. And I didn't say sorry because I wasn't sorry. I was just angry I've been caught again. And that's what life brings you. It's not about the money. It's about the lives that are hurt, people that are hurt, My dear second wife, who's one of my best friends now, by the way, and we've been divorced 39 years. When she divorced me, my son was 4 and my daughter was 2. And she said, I'm not divorcing you because you're a compulsive gambler. I'm divorcing you because of the person you've become. As she said to a friend, I don't ask him questions anymore because then he can't tell me when he lies. I know when he's lying, his lips move because I lied for the sake of lying. If I had porridge for breakfast, I told someone I had a full English. I could not speak the truth. And in the end, for her own sanity and the sake of the kids, she said, I've got to divorce you. She said, but I'll never stop you seeing the children. I know deep down inside, below all this, you love them. And I went round there nearly every day, abused it because she always gave me up dinner and this, that. And my daughter went on to go to university and study law. And I used to take the piss and I used to say, you're studying law, I broke it all my life. And she ended up to become a partner in a law firm. Now that daughter, she loves me dearly. Got a beautiful little 4.5-year-old granddaughter through her and everything.
Oh,
she came to court with me the last time I appeared at court, expecting to go away for 5 to 7 years. And God must have been looking after me that day. And she'd come down from Nottingham, where she was living at the time, and wrote a letter to the judge at Chelmsford Crown Court. And she said, me and my brother know about our father and his problems with gambling. When he's not gambling, he's a loving father. She said, but whatever you decide today at this court, whether you send him to prison yet again, or whether you give him another chance, whether my father ever gambles again, or whether he stops. She said, mine and my brother's love for our father is unconditional. Unconditional.
That's the thing. You're not born that way at the end of the day, and you're not born that way. It's an addiction and an illness that turns you into that person. Do you mean you're not born that way? You never set out to be horrible to anyone or to harm people, or make people sad, or none of my family
ever gambled. My father never gambled. My mother never gambled. Why me? It was my choice.
Do you think nowadays organisations do enough? And I was saying to you earlier that everywhere you go, you watch telly adverts everywhere. There's it's always
organisations do enough. We do all we can do. GA. We take a vow sort of thing to spread the word, help people that are suffering, but our hands are tied in a way. If the government won't do anything, if they still plague our TV sets with gambling, every advert break gambling. If we watch a football match and every team that gets on there, their advertising is with an online gambling company. It's you know what the woman that owns Bet365, right? Denise Coates, her name. She started off that business in a porter cabin in her back garden in Stoke-on-Trent. And last Christmas, she paid herself a bonus of £365 million. pounds. Now, where's that come from? From some poor souls and families that are suffering because of this addiction to gambling. And all they want to do is keep broadcasting more and more.
It's always so incentivized, isn't it, as well? You know, if you sign up, you know, you're going to get this for free, you're going to get that for free. I know
there's nothing that's free, is it? I said to you.
Yeah.
Because when you read the small print, if you used to win, you can't withdraw the amount until you've gambled it like 100 times. You know, because they know it's just a worm to attract a fish.
And it's people with multiple accounts, isn't it, as well? You know, different email addresses, trying to get that free bet, trying to win some money.
Yeah. I think they're different. You know, we're all the same.
And what would you? So for people that, you know, are gambling and they start to feel like they have got a problem,
just contact Gamblers Anonymous. You know, there's a phone number if you go online or whatever, or look up online. Just look up Gamblers Anonymous. It'll give you a list of meetings nearest to where you live, and just go along. We've all been to our first meeting at some time or other. You know, you're no different from any other person that's going there. They're going there to arrest their addiction one day at a time. But just when the monkey's off your back and time gets easier and all that, don't think I'm different to them. I'm cured now. I don't need to go. You know, if I feel like that, I'm not working this program properly. You know, the pilot light is always on. I'll be a compulsive gambler until they put me in the ground or toss me on the fire, you know. But at least they can say he was a compulsive gambler that didn't gamble and he did what he could to help others.
Absolutely. Well, Ian, it's been great to have you on here. You know, your story is fascinating. And you know, again, if, like I said earlier, if this video can help at least one person go and get help, you know, even better. Anything else you'd like to add?
Nope. Just don't suffer and put your loved ones through the same suffering. And don't think that you're different and nothing can help you. No one's got a problem bad as yours. You know, just come and seek help. Reach out for help and get hope for a future free of gambling.
Absolutely. And for yourself as well, Ian, you know, I know we spoke a couple of times before today. You know, I know you've not gambled in, is it 12 years now?
Yeah, 21st of July 2009 at 3:30 in the afternoon.
So, you know, absolutely brilliant. You know, it's incredible that you've managed to turn things around. But like you say, even now, it's a day at a time. It's not looking too far ahead.
No, yesterday won't mean, the last 12 years won't mean anything if I go out and gamble tomorrow, will it? I'll be back to square one again. Yeah,
no, absolutely. Anything you'd like to add, Shane?
No, it's just been a pleasure speaking to you, Ian, to be honest. It's been a pleasure to have someone who can come on, who can be so honest, so open, who can explain what they've been through. Because, I mean, there's going to be loads of people out there who are in a similar boat to you, or who recognise what you've discussed or what you've said, or it rings bells with themselves. And if it means that someone watches this and thinks, do you know what, bloody hell, I've just heard what Ian's gone through, and
never too late.
Yeah, I don't want to go down that path. And if I can do something and change because of this, then I think just being here, listening to you, for you saying your thing, it's just brilliant, really. At the end of the day, I can't just thank you enough, really, for being on here and doing what you've done today.
So if I help one person, it's been a successful evening.
Definitely, and you know, you're living proof that, you know, there is light at the end of the tunnel, even after going to some dark places. So. Absolutely. So thank you.
You've got a contact number. I think if ever you need to contact me again, or if anyone contacts you seeking help or whatever, want to speak to someone, let them phone me and speak to me.
Yeah, well, I'll do, Ian. I'll put in the description of the video. I'll put all the, you know, the numbers on there for Gambling Anonymous. I'll put a link to their website. Maybe, yeah, you know, in time we can do a follow up at some point if you're happy with that.
Pleasure, no problem.
Perfect. All right, and Ian, again, pleasure speaking with you. Thanks ever so much for your time. We both really appreciate it.
It's all right. Have a good night.
You too.
Hopefully the next time we speak, Spurs get a better result.
But we could do miracles, but the impossible.
Well said. Well said.
Cheers, cheers, boys.
All right. See you later. Thank you very much.
Yeah. God bless.